I've talked at length about the mainline classic Sonic series, but the Hedgehog had a lot more output than that, even in his early days. A lot of people nowadays only remember the Genesis platformers, but in reality, between 1991 and 1998, 28 games based on this franchise were released. That's an average of 4 games a year. Sonic was always Sega's golden boy. Let's dive into the classic Sonic spin-offs, Spinballs, and anything else that starred the Blue Blur back in the day. And we'll start with the very first spin-off game the franchise ever had. Sonic Eraser is a game that was very nearly erased from public memory. It saw an exclusive release on the Sega game Toshokan, an online service that only ran in Japan. The Western community was completely unaware of it until 2004, when it saw a re-release on Sega's Japanese website. A Sonic game lost to time! How exciting! What could it be? Well, Eraser is a puzzle game, and it's not a very good one. Blocks fall, you match them up, it's clunky, it's unintuitive, and the music is seriously the worst I've ever heard in a video game. Yeah! 1991 also saw the series make its arcade debut. Well, kind of. Sega Sonic Cosmo Fighter and Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car are less video games and more video machines, released only in Japan. They were more akin to being rides, albeit with a light game element. Sonic fans would have to wait a year or two for a proper arcade game. Ah, you see? Now this is more like it. Sega Sonic Arcade featured Sonic, Mighty the Armadillo, and the one-game wonder, Ray the Flying Squirrel. It came out in Japan, the UK, and possibly the US in 1993. The game uses a trackball to control the characters. As a result, it has never been ported to anything else, and I've never actually been able to play it. I always thought it looked like a lot of fun, though. Here is how you do a puzzle game. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine is the first puzzle game I ever played, and I had no idea what I was doing. But it's simple. Line up 4 beans of the same color in any configuration to clear them. Create chains to hamper your opponent. It's probably because of this competitive aspect that Mean Bean Machine is still my favorite puzzle game, and it's not unusual for my friends and I to bust it out to this day. You cannot play it passively. It constantly keeps you on your toes, and your best laid plans are always changing or going wrong. It's exciting! It also saw an 8-bit release on Game Gear and Master System. The gameplay is simple but deep. The music is excellent, and the game weirdly takes place in the continuity of the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. As confused as I was trying to figure out how to play it, I was even more flabbergasted when I rented Kirby's Avalanche on the Super Nintendo. It's the same exact game. Would Nintendo really just rip off Sega this blatantly? Nah. This game was actually called Puyo Puyo, and both Sega and Nintendo slapped different licenses on it for release internationally. But Mean Bean wasn't the only game based on the cartoons. Sonic Spinball is the first video game I ever rented. It was exactly what it sounds like. A whole game of stages based around Casino Night Zone's pinball mechanics. Collect emeralds, defeat bosses, and die a lot. This was not a good game for a 6-year-old. The learning curve was pretty much non-existent. The game just starts out frustrating and keeps getting harder, and it was literally years before I could even beat the first level. Spinball was developed without Sonic Team at the US-based Sega Technical Institute, and it has a lot of elements that were exclusive to the American portrayal of the character. The art style is reminiscent of the US cover art. The music is that hard edge sound, so distinctive of the Genesis, and the bonus stages feature cameos of characters that are otherwise exclusive to the Saturday morning cartoon and its spin-offs. Spinball also saw a release on the Game Gear and Master System, but I never played it when I was a kid. The physics are a bit off, but it doesn't seem too bad for an 8-bit title. And hey, speaking of games I never played, Tales in the Music Maker and Sonic Game World are edutainment titles, released for this ridiculous-looking console, the Sega Pico. I actually did have a Pico when I was a kid, and believe it or not, I had quite a bit of fun with it. But although I knew about these games, we could never find them for sale anywhere. Sonic Schoolhouse is another educational game, exclusive to the PC in 1996. Again, I have never played it. Aside from Sonic himself being present, it barely even looks like a Sonic game. And what was the deal with Sonic's voice?
I'm Sonic. Click on me for help.
One more game I never played. Sonic Drift was released only in Japan on the Game Gear in early 1994. What you're seeing here is my first time finally trying it. It's a pretty obvious takeoff of Mario Kart, and likewise, this was the first time the series' antagonist was a playable character. There's not a whole lot to it. Get rings, hit springs, collect power-ups, try to come in first. The courses all hail from Sonic 1. A sequel came out in 1995, and this one was released in the US and Europe as well. Even though the original never came out over here, they still called it Sonic Drift 2. I had no idea what happened to Sonic Drift 1. But this sequel expands the roster, enhances the power-up system, and features features levels from Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and some original courses. In both games, the graphics are well animated, big, and colorful. It's not too shabby for the Game Gear. The biggest missed opportunity here is the music. It would have been awesome to hear 8-bit remixes of the Genesis tracks, but the tunes here are just generic and forgettable. And speaking of forgettable, Wacky Worlds was kinda Sega's answer to Mario Paint, and it wasn't a very good answer. It barely even qualifies as a Sonic game, but man was he ever featured prominently on the box. Cash Cow franchise, remember? Anyway, you place pieces, you animate scenes, you recolor sprites, you make tails fly, you blow everything up. It was briefly interesting to mess around with, but there's not a whole lot to it, and it's not surprising it's nearly forgotten. Hey, look! 7Qs, 7,770,777, is a rebel, and did exactly what I asked him not to. So, alright, here it is. Sonic Labyrinth. If you've been watching for any length of time, I think it's pretty obvious what a huge Sonic fan I am. So you can only imagine how crazy I was about the series when I was a kid. Pretty much anything that Sega slapped Sonic smug on, I would try to get it. So if I didn't have a Sonic game, if I didn't even want a Sonic game, something really had to go wrong. And so I remember going to Kmart with my parents circa 1995 and reading the back of a box. It said, "One day, Sonic woke up from a nap to find that his classic red sneakers have been replaced with Dr. Robotnik's new invention, Slowdown Boots. Curses! In order to remove them, Sonic must go through Robotnik's Great Labyrinth and retrieve the Chaos Emeralds." And so I put the game back on the shelf. Even at 7 years old, I knew I didn't want this game. You very slowly walk around these seemingly random stages. Or you can try spin dashing. But the graphics are so big and Sonic takes up so much of the screen, spin dashing is an exercise in even more randomness. Sonic Labyrinth was a bad idea made even worse in its execution, and I am thankful that I was smart enough to avoid it. At last, it's time to get into something that I know a lot of you have been waiting for, the 8-bit platformers. The 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog was released on the Master System and Game Gear in late 1991. It's a very different game from the 16-bit version. Some of the zones are the same, and of course Green Hill's in there, but it's original in terms of level layouts, most of the soundtrack, and even a lot of tropes and gimmicks. I said back in the Sonic 1 retrospective that what really set Sonic apart was that this style of game could not have been done in the previous generation. Yet, here's Sonic, running on an 8-bit system. Was I inaccurate? Is the Master System just that powerful? Nah, not really. One thing common to all the 8-bit Sonic games is that they're bound to the limitations of their hardware. While Sonic 1 on the Genesis grabbed your attention with its spectacle and got you hooked with its unique gameplay, Sonic 1 on the Game Gear is forced to keep things significantly more traditional. After all, Genesis does what Game Gear can't. The physics are somewhat present, but they take a backseat to platforming. There are sometimes multiple ways through a level, but they tend to be a lot shorter and less divergent. The special stages are entirely absent, and instead you simply seek out an emerald within each zone. I mean, there's even a scrolling stage. What does a Sonic game need with a scrolling stage? It can also be quite challenging. The biggest mark against it is the fact that you never get any rings before fighting bosses. You have very little room for learning attack patterns. You cannot make mistakes. So with all that taken into consideration, is this a bad game? Not in the slightest. This is a fantastic game. The controls are just as tight and just as natural as they are on the Genesis, making all that platforming a snap. The level design is varied between acts and interesting throughout. It wasn't nearly as groundbreaking as the Genesis version, but I honestly think it's a lot more consistent. The 8-bit Sonic 2 would diverge even more from its 16-bit brethren. Tails is present, but only long enough to be kidnapped. And on that note, Frederic asked if it would have been better if Amy or Sally had been kidnapped instead. Well, considering neither character even existed until 1993, probably not. And come on, enough with the damsels in distress already. It's time those oppressive kitsune got knocked down a peg. Down with the Foxyarchy! Wait, what was I saying? Right, this is a very different Sonic 2. The spin dash is conspicuously absent, none of the stages are the same, and many of the badniks are just reused from Sonic 1. It barely calls to the wonderful 16-bit version, choosing instead to stand on original content. So how does it fare? This is a weird sequel. Instead of improving on the original, it makes what were minor blemishes in Sonic 1 a whole lot worse. Most egregious is the difficulty. Sonic 1 might not have given you rings, but its bosses were fairly simple and predictable. Sonic 2, on the other hand, is all too happy to bounce you into a projectile if you dare land wrong. Which wouldn't be so bad, but you still don't get any protection. Underground Zone is one of the least interesting opening levels in the series. Why they'd make this level 1 and make the much breezier and better designed Green Hills Zone level 4 is beyond me. But hey, I did just notice a cool detail capping this footage. The background of the title card font is the same as the opening. Yeah, sorry if you noticed this years ago, but I think it's kinda cool. Sonic Chaos, which hit the Master System and Game Gear in 1993, did a much better job of emulating the Genesis series. The game was faster, the physics were somewhat more accurate, and the level structure tended towards multiple paths. Not only that, but you could finally collect rings before bosses. But best of all, the Spin Dash made its 8-bit debut. It still didn't match Sonic in 16-bit, but it was a very good approximation. Tails is now a playable character, and Sonic Chaos is actually where he gained the ability to fly under player control for the first time. Sonic, meanwhile, has a speed charge reminiscent of the Super Peel-Out and rocket shoes. Rocket shoes! I thought this was the most awesome thing in the world when I was 6. I really wanted a pair. Sonic Triple Trouble came out a year later, and it's everything a sequel should be. Chaos is a pretty good game, but it's a tech demo next to Triple Trouble. The stages are much larger and better designed, and everything just has an extra layer of polish. Triple Trouble takes a few cues from Sonic 3 and featuring Knuckles as an antagonist, doing some inter-zone cutscenes. It's also one of the few appearances of Fang the Sniper, who was called Knack the Weasel in some countries. Should I have made a separate video where that was the only difference? Triple Trouble was developed exclusively for the Game Gear, though there is a fan port to the Master System that extends the resolution. The controls and physics are still a bit clunky when compared to the Genesis, but this one pushes the Game Gear to its absolute limits. It was the perfect way for the 8-bit platforming series to come to an end. But alas, that was not the end of the 8-bit series. In 1996, Sonic Blast was smeared into existence. Who looked at this and said, "Yep, that looks like it's ready for release"? Why would you even try to do pre-rendered graphics on the Game Gear? The color palette alone makes everything atrocious, but what's just as bad are the animations, or the lack thereof. Everything is jerky and unrealistic. There aren't enough frames to give the impression of movement, and so everything comes off a bit disconcerting. If you can somehow look past the graphics, Sonic Blast is just a well below average platformer. It's tremendously uninspired. There was also a Master System version, which at least improves the resolution, though they barely bothered to optimize it. Truth be told, I didn't really care for any of these 8-bit Sonics when I was a kid. Back then, a portable version of the game just couldn't measure up to the consoles or arcades. So to me, they were just the inferior ports that ran on that bulky thing with a blurry screen that went through batteries faster than a speeding hedgehog. They were okay if I was on a trip and had nothing else, but I would never play them over the Genesis counterparts. But that was not true for everyone. As we've talked about, the Nintendo Entertainment System absolutely dominated the US and Japan throughout the 8-bit era. And maybe that's why I've never known a single person around here who ever owned a Master System.
And coming soon, Monopoly.
In fact, most people have never even heard of it. If you happen to fall in that camp, the Master System was Sega's 3rd generation console. It competed directly with the NES. In most of the world, it failed pretty hard. Across the pond, though, it was a different story. In Europe, the Master System was by some measures more successful than the NES. The reason so many of these 8-bit games saw release on both the Master System and Game Gear is pretty simple. The two featured extremely similar architecture. The Game Gear almost literally is a slightly souped-up Master System with a larger color palette and stereo sound. The problem when it came to Sonic is that smaller screen. Not only was the resolution much lower, the screen itself was very prone to blurring at high speeds. And here's the most obvious example. The first boss of Sonic 2. Seems pretty simple, right? You just dodge the balls as they bounce down the hill, they hit the boss, there you go. Now, here's that same boss on the Game Gear. Look at this crap. You have way less room to see them coming. And worse yet, for some reason they bounce at different heights and speeds. I might have gotten a Game Gear when I was 6, but it was years before I got past the first level of Sonic 2, and this is why. On the Master System, Sonic 2 is still not as good as Sonic 1, but it's enjoyable enough. On the Game Gear, Sonic 2 is an impossible nightmare! Because of this, these games are far more fun to play on the Master System. And because people across the pond actually had Master Systems, there's a lot of affinity over there for these titles. I think it might have led to a cultural difference in the fan base. I'm speaking very generally here, and I have nothing but personal evidence to back this up. But remember what I said about how the 8-bit games had to base themselves more on platforming than speed? It seems like people who were introduced to the series through these titles tend to favor the slower side of Sonic's mechanics to this day, whereas we Americans lean more toward the gotta go fast mentality that Sonic 2 on the Genesis did so well. In any case, I have found a new appreciation for the 8-bit platformers as I've gotten older. I think Sonic 1 is honestly my favorite of the series. Strange, isn't it? While later titles did do a decent job of pulling off the Genesis style, Sonic 1 didn't try to push 8-bit past what it was capable of, and it's a more solid game because of it. Seeing as I like it so much, Nickname wants me to do an entire video on the 2nd level of Sonic 1, Bridge Zone. Who knows? I may just be crazy enough to try. Man, this is getting long in the tooth. I severely underestimated not only how many Sonic games there are, but how much I would have to say about them. So, I think we'll cut it off here for now. But next time, we'll see Sonic enter the 32-bit era and make the jump to the third dimension. Well, kind of. While you're waiting on that, Nick asked me for my thoughts on Unknown Archive's Sonic Files, Running on Empty. It's a series of 2 documentaries, each lasting about an hour. Like my series, these videos discuss Sonic games through the ages. Unlike my series, these videos are overwhelmingly negative, cynical, and insulting. Worse yet, they are full of some of the most disgusting imagery that I have ever subjected myself to on YouTube. They are also creative, hilarious, and extremely entertaining. I don't even agree with a lot of what he says, but they're just a blast to watch. The Geek critique is at the point where I get a lot of comments saying that I deserve more views than I'm getting right now, and I think this guy does too. Just keep in mind that he absolutely despises just about everything Sonic did post-1994. If you're a big fan of the modern games, and you can't laugh at someone callously trashing things that you like, you might want to stay away. And like I said, it's definitely R-rated, so viewer discretion and all that. Check that out if you'd like, and hey, thanks for watching.